Wow, that was informative and incredibly enlightening. Just before I introduce Steffen, I'll talk a little bit about 23, which you can probably guess from the slide deck is all about video. If you've come to any of these hug events in the past, you'll know that we like video. We're kind of vaguely obsessed with it, amongst other things. And 23 have been the bedrock of White Hat's video platform, both on the marketing side and the sales side, right from day one. Literally, the recordings will go up, they'll be edited, they'll be available. So if you want to see this in action, go to the White Hat site. But I'll just give you one little story, if you like, of how this works. We've been doing these hugs now for, gosh, I don't know, 5, 6 years. And one of the very first ones I ever gave was about the basics of search engine optimization, right? It's what we do, it's what we specialize in. We're a SEO agency specializing in HubSpot, right? So I got up on stage, I spoke about SEO and how it works, gave through the basics. And that recording, that overview of the process gets a lot of traffic on our site. But not only that, it directly generates leads. There's an embedded call to action button in the video that links directly to my calendar. And I get calendar bookings randomly from people who say, I saw your video, I like it, I understand and trust you based on what I've heard, let's talk. And I've got no idea where these things come from, my just calendar gets full. Probably, I mean, not flooding, I'm not going crazy about this, maybe one a month. But this is like 5 years ago. To give you an idea of the power of video in marketing sales. So with that in mind, I'll introduce Steffen, who is the CTO at 23. Thank you very much.
Let's see how all this is perfect. I've been sitting there for 45 minutes kind of fretting about the 2 mics. So now I hope it works, and I'm also starting by apologizing for not having any QR codes. So it's like being very high technology. But either way, I'm Steffen. Just to introduce myself very shortly, I am one of 2 co-founders of a Danish European company called 23, specializing in video, webinars, and a bunch of things in between. I'll talk a bunch about that, how video is working in the organization, and I'll work my way into talking basically about the stories that you just shared, kind of taking from the vantage point of being, hey, can we tell better stories in video, all the way into, well, how does that impact marketing? How does that impact sales? And ultimately, how does that impact HubSpot? Because if nothing else, I'm kind of the geeky guy who's being let out of the basement at times, right? I've built a bunch of our platforms, so I'm very kind of like, I'll fret a lot about video quality and transcoding and real-time things in webinars, and also fret a lot about HubSpot. So I built our HubSpot integration, 5, 6 years back, and have been kind of refining that over time. So I'll try to shy away from that for kind of introducing video, talking a bit about how organizations are using video, but I'll sure get back to that. And I'm doing this mainly to say that I'm trying to not spend 45 minutes of your time very kind of deep into workflows and list makings and media bridges. But it's something that I, have spent a lot of time on, care deeply about. So if you're the guy in the room who's thinking, or the girl in the room thinking, well, tell me all about media bridge, I'll be that guy as well. So video marketing and video marketing adoption, it's kind of coming from this point where we are all visual beings, but we also had basically, I want to say, you can measure it in many different ways, but we were all kind of through this 600-year cycle of textual communication. It's how societies were built, it's how democracies were built, and all the way down to how most of us went to school. We were all taught, hey, how do we become really good about essentially writing an email, or how do we get quality enough in our prompts into ChatGPT in order to get text coming back. But the internet, if nothing else, have been kind of the spurring on of this massive transformational shift in how companies, organizations, people are able to communicate, right? Moving from textual communication to visual communication. And that's, well, something that technology enables, but it's also something that we as whatever marketeers and salespeople and developers and business owners and everything in between kind of can take seriously in a way that, hey, visual communication really allows us to kind of like, well, I guess reestablish the marketplace in some cases, right? There's stuff that visual communication is just better at doing. It's better at showing stories. It's better at kind of showing real people. And we as a company, we're kind of bought into this core idea of, well, if you enable people to use visual communication, use video, you can kind of reestablish stuff that's basically human. You can actually be real about things, right? And I think that's the trend of video as well. It used to be Coca-Cola commercials and kind of this very kind of, well, like narrow-casted way of using video down to, well, 30 seconds of commercials or 10 seconds of pre-rolls on YouTube. But we're all finding that there are ways of telling our stories that is kind of reestablishing kind of humanity in a way. But as companies, we're better able to show who we are, what we care about, what we do, how we help our customers, and how we establish value using video and webinars and everything in between, right? So the core idea of 23, I mean, there's a bunch of things of how we synchronize data into HubSpot, all that kind of stuff. But if we're telling the story of who we are, we're basically on a mission to help companies, businesses out there kind of take video seriously in terms of everything they do, whether that's about recording a video for internal communication, running a webinar, bringing people in around that, hosting videos, doing that in a way that also is valuable 5 years on, and attaching marketing to that. Some statistics about video marketing. It is getting to be this kind of priority format where video is actually being used, and you'll know that from your organizations. If you put some numbers on it, we can see that kind of people that are using video, they basically get more traffic, right? 78% of people that are using video as a part of their online communication, they will get more traffic on their webpage, specifically thanks to video content, and 70% of those are also getting more leads. Exactly the story that we just heard. In our own country, we can kind of see, hey, we enabled 1.4 million people to participate in a webinar last year. Those are not just participants in a webinar that spend some time in a webinar. Those are actually leads generated for a company that used video to kind of bridge the chasm that were before, hey, go to our website, into, hey, come hang out with us in a webinar, engage, be part of a chat, answer some questions, but also natively get to know our companies. So like the lead gen part of that is a huge thing. So why is this adoption of video kind of coming, well, now? I mean, we can talk about pandemics and we can talk about how we all sit in front of a computer with a webcam much more of our time, but kind of at its core, it's a natural thing. It is pretty human, and I think it talks exactly to the conversation we just had about sense making. Video is hugely kind of beneficial in terms of sense making, in terms of being kind of, hey, we're human. On a more kind of marketing side, there's also a lot of bandwidth in video, right? In the sense that there's a lot of data, there's a lot of signal in what we can glean from how people are using video, and increasingly it's also easy. Some of this is all the people that were taught to write text in school are getting more and more kind of visually native. We all carry phones in our pockets, but it's also something where there's more allowances for not having just high quality video. So there's a lot more tooling out there to make video something that's easy to use and easy to adopt. So I'll try to kind of unbundle some of these kind of the humanness, the dataness, and the easiness of video. The fallacy, I think, in our industry, like when I talk about marketing in specifics, is that video is something that does kind of like, I spoke about this bandwidth thing, right? So there's a qualitative side of video that's hugely important in terms of like communication, storytelling. There's stuff that kind of like is relational in video. We can look people in the eyes and we can tell a story. But we're undervaluing the quantitative side of that part. So in a lot of ways, if we want to define this kind of the idea of video marketing, webinar marketing, and a lot of those kind of things in between, we need to find that path in terms of how we adopt video that gives equal weight to being able to tell the stories, being human, but also having basically funnels and KPIs and metrics associated with stuff. And that's a real challenge. I think I'll show some kind of adoption stats, because this is still where we're hurting as an industry. I mean, it's the case for kind of everyone adopting HubSpot, whether you're adopting video or you're adopting the CRM. You're getting really good about the kind of the qualitative sides of putting stuff in, but we really need to be better at attaching kind of the right goals and the right metrics on the backside of that to know that we're also results oriented. So video can be results oriented in a number of different ways when you think about, well, what are the things that we do through the funnel? What are the specifics, kind of initiatives that we're taking? Are we building how-tos to fill particular parts of the funnel? So this is very much like a content marketing strategy and how video fits into, I mean, I know we're all talking about flywheels now, but if we're just in terms of the core funnel, video actually has a huge place in terms of well, basically doing stuff very top of the funnel, just like, hey, being on social, doing expert interviews, and all the way down to doing customer advocacy. We're doing a webinar actually right now for 6 of our customers that are on a beta for a co-hosting of webinars. And that's a crucial thing for us, right? It's actually getting those 6 people to be advocates for a feature that we're launching 2 weeks from now, right? So that's very much like something that we're relating to people, enabled by technology, but actually having real people stand in front of a camera and tell our stories. So this is the soft side of it. This becomes the qualitative side of how you use video to plug into to your marketing funnels. The quantitative side of that is equally important. So same funnel, there's this whole idea of like, what are all the things I can do along the way? But there's also, what do you actually measure? What are the KPIs that you associate with this, right? How do you measure basically everything from plays all the way down to like email click-through rates and turnout rates? So this is the other part of this map, and I'll try to unbundle this and talk a bit about how we actually enable all this stuff in HubSpot. But just kind of take the point from here is that qualitative side of video, we kind of natively understand there's a challenge in figuring out how do we make more and more formats fit into everything that we do. But on the other side, there's also figuring out like what are the KPIs that we meter by? Like how do we know that we're successful? If we want to build loyalty, do we actually get people to turn out? Do we actually get them to put stuff in our baskets? Does that merchandise come back afterwards because they were not satisfied with the merchandise and didn't understand it, right? Video has a huge way of kind of impacting all of these metrics. But as marketers, we kind of tend to be stuck on the one metric that, I love this is the Danish slide, so this is like the number of views, right? But we need to kind of be switching and figuring out, okay, we know how many plays we're getting, but on the other side, how many leads are we generating? How many successful deals? How much revenue? How much basket size are we increasing, and so on? So I think that's kind of the starting point for how we look at video, and I think also kind of how the change in video marketing is coming about. To not only talk about kind of what video should we be making in our companies, but honestly also kind of marrying that with the idea of what should I be measuring around video, and there's a journey that kind of goes with that. Everything from saying, hey, I have video on my website, into like actually doing video attribution in HubSpot, knowing how like particular videos, webinar attendance, and so on matters for lead scoring and everything in between. And that's a journey that everyone kind of can go on, not figuring out how you tick all the boxes, but figuring out what are the lead KPIs that you want to be doing. I have some examples of those as we go along. So not to dive too deeply into kind of what 23 is, we are of Copenhagen. We're hosting videos and managing videos and webinars for 500 customers, managing a few million videos on the platform, and basically building out this video suite that caters to everything from running webinars, recording videos, all the way down in the funnel to having, like, I should say, kick-ass video analytics, but also video attribution to know not only what videos are being made, how they're being hosted, how they're being branded, but also how they matter for the funnel and how we're successful as marketers in terms of using this stuff. So I promised I'll come back to the geeky part, and I'll try to limit the geeky part. Instead, what I'll try to do is like I'll look a bit at the state of video, and to kind of say, how are people slowly adopting video? What are the KPIs that they meter for? What are the challenges that they're finding? And what are the gaps in the market that we as marketers can start using, because there's still an opportunity to be kind of over-competing the rest of the world. This is all based on a few different reports that we do. So we do these 4 reports every year covering the state of video marketing, state of webinars, and the state of personal video. All of this is driven from both kind of like actual quantitative data and how people are producing different videos at different times, what actually has the highest impact, but also from surveys. So we try to kind of survey the market to figure out what are the things that matter in video, what are the things that work in video, what are the fallacies that don't work, and basically kind of use all that data to bubble up to create recommendations for doing better, more efficient videos and kind of identifying the opportunities out there. So starting at adoption and use cases, we've seen a kind of massive uptake, not necessarily in the number of videos being produced, but as this kind of always on activity. So more and more marketing teams are producing videos. I mean, not daily, it's not a daily exercise that most marketing teams do, but out of the surveyed companies, we see that there's a move, and this is like if you compare it to the year ago and 2 years ago, actually the quarterly and the monthly things are very much in the uptake. And that's just a kind of general idea that we're starting to see more people engaged in producing videos and more people having this kind of always on thing where video is a natural part of video production. Video is also kind of getting to be a broader mix. We come from this world where people are being told, hey, you shouldn't do a video that's more than 90 seconds, preferably only 30 seconds, because that's what people will watch. What we're seeing is like a flattening out of those curves to see that people are producing a lot of different types of videos, different purposes, and also longer videos. And the same thing is happening for webinars. So if we survey everyone that are doing webinars, I mean, probably a few thousand companies here that are all kind of either very new to webinars or have been doing webinars for a long time, we see that more than 20% of them are actually doing more than 50 webinars a year. So again, this kind of flattening out and saying it's not that we have a webinar or video strategy that has one hero video on our webpage and one launch of a product every year, but rather a lot of different use cases where video is just another means of communication. And in a lot of cases that becomes kind of the switch from text to visual communication. Is also about normalizing it as a tool. And these are the metrics that kind of prove how that is being adopted by organizations. And certainly, I mean, if you compare the pre-pandemic numbers to the post-pandemic numbers, we also saw a steep uptake. Nobody decreased, or very few people decreased their use of webinars and videos, but rather about 50% actually increased. And a lot of this is kind of natural in terms of taking online events and taking them offline. But actually, this is a number that's stuck, right? That a lot of the switch in usage and switch in adoption actually changed and kind of stuck into how people are using webinars as a part of their everyday communication. So, looking at everyone that are doing webinars, I'll have some of these numbers for videos as well. But the core idea is like people actually do roughly 3 webinars every month, or 33 webinars per year. And it's a fairly recent thing. So we also see this number going up. So just talking a bit about the general adoptions, like we see this kind of uptake, but also we see an immaturity in terms of what people are using videos and webinars for still. That the main exercise in doing webinars is very much about lead generation, but not necessarily those deeper processes that is about customer advocacy, facilitating onboarding processes and stuff like that. So if we talk about kind of the opportunities out there, there's still, well, essentially a lot of room to grow in terms of kind of getting from a very kind of, well, mechanical thing of saying we want to generate some leads. That's cool. But if we look back at the funnel from before, hey, there's an opportunity to go deeper into the funnel and use more and more of this stuff to also bridge into internal communication, to customer communication, and into partner communication. Big slides and a lot of numbers, but it's basically telling the same story as before. That a lot of video and a lot of webinar adoption is still ad hoc. right? It's still this idea that we're doing more of them, we're doing more in different kind of parts of the organization, but the programmation, I should say, of using webinars is still something, and videos, and it's the same story. It's still something that's in the becoming, right? We do a lot of standalones, ad hoc things that are not necessarily repeated into webinar series, and episodic is still not kind of crossing the chasm into the internal organizations. And same things on KPIs as before. A lot of it is kind of measured in simple KPIs, number of attendees rather than how much value did this generate on my sales pipeline. Looking at amount of signups rather than going into, did I actually manage to qualify leads just on the core part of it, right? So we have a lot of data. If you kind of think about the two bubbles from before, we're still very much about the quantitative side of things, and we still haven't adopted the idea that we can actually use data associated with webinars and with video in a kind of productive fashion that enables our businesses to be progressing. A few points on engagement as well. This becomes very small. I can barely read it from here. That's the problem of doing slides from a piece of paper. This is basically the average play percentage. I spoke before about this idea that we've all been told that, hey, you should make very short videos. Don't be telling long stories. Don't try to engage with people on a deeper level, like to the point. But actually what we're finding is that, like even for a longer video, the playthrough percentage of those videos are amazingly long, right? So even if you produce a video that's 45 minutes, people will actually watch something like a third of that on average. So that's 15 minutes of engagement on that one. If you kind of put that into to kind of a mix of like all the videos being produced, 50%, 48%, 47% of videos produced are less than 2 minutes, with only 7% of videos being produced over 45 minutes. But the actual engagement driven from those longer videos is massive. It's actually more than 50% of the engagement of videos across all of our customers come from long videos, and they only kind of make up for 15% of all the videos produced. So that's kind of a simple point of like, why would we be flattening out the curves and the different videos that we produce? And there's a huge gap in terms of figuring out what am I optimizing for. Obviously, if you're optimizing top funnel, people need to know exactly what you do. Probably you want to be telling that story in 30 seconds or 90 seconds. If you want to go deep and tell the story about like what is SEO actually do, like what are the processes we want to be doing, you want to be educating people and you want to be kind of you want to be sense making for them in a way. And video does that really well, but it also means that we need to allow ourselves to be doing that. And that's kind of one of the certain gaps that we see in the market, that there's a huge opportunity to be optimizing for time on site, engagement on video with videos. There's a huge opportunity to be using videos to generate leads as a part of the video process. I mean, again, back to the story that was just shared. You all know the pop-up windows that you get when you visit a site. You probably all use them or have used them or have tried using them. They usually convert less than 1%. And certainly even if you're really good about those kind of, hey, do you want to sign up for a newsletter pop-ups, you convert them at like roughly 2.5% on average. In video collection or in video sign-up forms convert a lot better than that. So this is across all the videos that are using conversion forms in the videos. If you have a conversion point before the video even starts, 31% of people will actually sign up. Might not book a meeting, but they'll sign up for a newsletter. They'll go into your lead pipeline. During the video, 13%, that's still like 8x better than those pop-up forms. And even after the video is done, you're outperforming what you would do for pop-ups in general. So there's a huge opportunity again here to start lead generating with video. And the same thing goes even like in cases where you're not like, well, basically forcing people to be signing up. So this is the case where like you can have forms that are either skippable or non-skippable. The non-skippable ones, obviously they convert better. So in 24% of cases, people will actually convert if they're watching a video, they're getting a pop-up form, and they can't continue unless they kind of convert on this gate. But even for the keep playing ones, the ones that are just like, hey, do you want to like learn more about SEO? Do you want to like get more information around this particular thing? Sign up for a newsletter. 11% of those are generating leads from a play. So that's a huge conversion rate right there. Data can get us to be basically optimizing for the things that we want to be optimizing for. So there's a huge question of like, am I optimizing for how many leads am I generating? Am I optimizing for engagement? I have an example here from the webinar space where like we've been running a webinar platform for 5-6 years. And we were looking at it and saying like, why do everyone run their webinars on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays? Like I'm an ops guy, so it's like we need to have more servers. It's more expensive to get up in the morning on a Wednesday than it is on a Monday, and it makes no sense. But literally, like 75% of webinars happen in the middle of the week, with Mondays and Fridays being kind of weak. And I think we all know why. You can actually ask ChatGPT, like, when is the best day to have a webinar? And it will say, yeah, it's probably on a Tuesday or a Wednesday, because then that's when people watch webinars. Well, it actually kind of isn't, because the attendance rates on Mondays and Fridays are higher than in the middle of the week. And attendees also have a higher attention span later in the week. So actually people will be more likely to turn out on a Monday or a Friday, and they'll also be more likely to stick around for longer on a Thursday and a Friday in this case. So those means that, hey, you should actually be running your webinars on a Friday, but only if you are optimizing for engagement. So taking the story all the way back to knowing what do you want to be doing with your marketing strategy. Are you generating leads? Are you generating deep engagement? Probably if you're generating leads, yeah, you should probably be going for a Monday. If you're generating engagement, Fridays are kind of a good part. Again, mornings, same story, right? That we have all these biases in our mind where, depending on what we want to be optimizing for, we should be taking different paths. You shouldn't be scheduling your webinars in the middle of the night. That's, I think, something that everyone knows, but data shows it as well. So looking at core KPIs, right, there's this idea that, well, webinars can generate a lot of leads. Actually, people will have around 250 registrants for a webinar on average. People will usually kind of have webinars that are running sort of in the 45-minute segment, like pretty long. We always thought that, hey, it would be like 20 minutes, but normal webinars are kind of like getting close to an hour. Average duration is actually longer because a lot of people then run 4-hour webinars. But like the biggest most common thing is to run like roughly for an hour, and people turn out 60% of people that are signed up. So you can kind of think about that in the funnel way, where you're thinking, okay, what should I be doing around, again, videos and webinars to a point of saying I can get 250 people to sign up. I'll probably get 180 to come out for webinars in general. But the massive part of that is like, that's what you don't get for normal lead engagement, is you'll also have people actually sticking around for 46 minutes on average. This is for live webinars. For on-demand webinars, they're there for roughly 10 minutes. So there's a huge kind of engagement thing that marries all of this stuff on the video side. So yeah, some key kind of performance indicators on the webinar side, and I'll share the same things for video. So getting the video mix right is important, like not kind of settling on one particular way of running video, but using videos at different parts of the funnel. I shared that mix before, right? It's not about only doing social video or doing only customer advocacy videos, but it's about figuring out a way that will allow you to run this in a kind of structured fashion where there's an ongoing mix. Get video right on your website. I didn't share the numbers here, but basically video on your website is performing 8x better than stuff on social media. It's like, it is people that you own, it's people that are branded, but people are more likely to see the video, they're more likely to actually click play on the video, and they'll also engage for a lot longer. It depends a bit on whether it's YouTube or Facebook or LinkedIn, but even in the kind of most simple reading, like people on your website will engage 8x higher with the videos. That also means more leads. Increasing the production cadence kind of comes with the video mix. in a way where it's important to be experimenting, to not kind of be like settled down on a particular way of doing stuff. So this is more about building this muscle of all of us moving from textual to visual communication. And finally, there's still a huge opportunity to be using video for converting leads. I shared some of those numbers before, and it's kind of weird because we're still seeing a world where less than 1% of videos are gated or even ask for a conversion point. All right, so that's cool. That's a lot about how can we use data, what are the kind of approaches to doing so, what is the data we can generate, and a fairly somewhat sizable list of potential KPIs. So how do we narrow that down and use that as a part of HubSpot, marketing automation, or data analytics? So I said this before, I've been kind of engaged in the HubSpot ecosystem for the last 5-6 years, and I'm very kind of into the idea of what can you be doing on the HubSpot platform, what is possible to do once you start saying, well, I have video, I'm starting to collect data, I'm starting to collect leads, but how do you kind of marry that with your system of record? And I won't be going into all the check marks. I mean, I'm happy to be talking about how we're better than the rest of the world, but that's for coffee afterwards, I guess. But basically, what do you want to be doing with video? What are the expectations that you should be having once you start saying, well, we want to be serious in video, but we're also serious about our marketing and our marketing toolbox and our marketing database? Well, you want to be making sure that your data is connected. You want to be making sure that your data that comes in from one point is actually available in HubSpot. You want to make sure that all the contact data that comes in around video is actually synced to HubSpot. And you want to make sure that all the people that are already known in HubSpot are also attributed on the video side. You want to make sure that there's a coherent way to run conversions along the way to basically, I mean, we've spoken about this at nauseam at this point, but you want to make sure that there's a easy way of saying the videos that people are watching, probably the videos that are being watched further down the funnel, if people are not converted already, we should be converting them. You want to be using video data to drive your segmentation, your lead scoring, and you want to be tying all this stuff into to workflows. So that's connect and sync. It's the easy part. That's in a lot of cases just like setting up stuff. But it's also making sure that you kind of have like these conversion points in a way that works for customers. It's about making sure that you get kind of all the data married in the same place, where you can basically see that, hey, Steffen watched 6 videos, spent 7 minutes doing so. What are the video milestones that are part of that? What's the most recent video I watched? And you want to be using that for segmentation. So you want to be kind of getting to a point where the people that watch these particular kinds of videos, these particular kinds of webinars are actually kind of built into your nurturing, built into your list making, and ultimately also built into your lead scoring. All of this is actually quite tough, I would say, but the interesting thing is that this is actually something that kind of happened while we were sleeping. HubSpot got really, really good at video. They got good at video in the sense of not having video management within HubSpot, but having a lot of good ways of taking the data that comes not just from video, but from a lot of different sources, and getting it natively into HubSpot in the way that we all want as HubSpot users. So they got really good about saying, well, whatever video archive you have, you can make that available in HubSpot in a way that does video attribution. Whatever workflow setup you have, you can use those workflows to be driving, well, video workflows, but also webinar signups and so on. But also they got really good at doing kind of custom data that allows you to natively hold people that are attending marketing events, people that are watching videos, and saying kind of what are the milestones I associate with that in order to do video attribution. So you can actually get all of this stuff in place to a point where like you can get real-time data that flows into HubSpot. You can do conditional gating, progressive profiling, and working this in a way with everything that's embedded into to one place. You can have all of these different interaction flows kind of get into HubSpot in real time, but you can also use the tooling of HubSpot to know that, well, you can do workflows around that list making, lead attribution, and so on. And that's the main point here, is that all of the stuff that I just kind of spoke about, the idea of what are the KPIs that you're optimizing for, knowing engagement time, specific milestones, different kinds of webinars, different kinds of videos, conditional gating, lead forms and everything else in that one is actually hook upable. It can be hooked up to HubSpot because they're getting to a point where timeline events actually work, to a point where you can do flows that will basically, if somebody answers a poll in a webinar, we have a customer that are selling these kind of collaborative robots. It's basically robots that are standing next to you that will do repeated tasks. And they're doing webinars as a part of their kind of qualification cycle. And during that webinar, they'll ask a poll saying like how close are you to buying a collaborative robot? And if you say I'm pretty close, you can set up a workflow that means that a salesperson will actually contact that person within the next few hours, right? So that's a whole way of saying we have a way of engaging people, we have a way of collecting data, but we also have a way of collecting data that uses the native capabilities of our marketing automation and our CRM system to be taking all of this stuff into our native lives to be automating stuff around it. So that's kind of the starting point. And as I said, I didn't want to go too deeply into to the media bridges and to the marketing events, APIs and all those kind of things. Those are fascinating because they all matter to us in terms of how do you set up the workflows, how do you actually do attribution, how much weight in your lead scoring do you do when people watch a particular video and so on. So if you are interested in that kind of stuff, come ask me or come ask Asger, who's sitting here on the front row. But I think the main point for me is we're back to this idea that video is easy, at least getting easier. Video is human, it's sense-making, it's storytelling in a way that is actually approachable to all of us, but also it's data. So our challenge as marketeers become more, how do we associate the right KPIs and hook them up to our system to a way where we can kind of fulfill our tasks as marketeers by using all of this kind of storytelling in a way that matters for the customer base, or for the sales team, I should say. That's it.
Do we have any questions?
Yes. Yeah, so the question is about, quick tips for video SEO, or rather, all of the things you just said, Steffen, is about humans and watching videos. What do we actually use video for when it comes to priming search engines to know about this stuff? I mean, the basics of video SEO come a lot down to having really good metadata, just as anything in life, having good metadata for stuff. Few points on video SEO is that, first of all, it matters that video is on your own website versus on YouTube or on Facebook. It's the most common fallacy is that we've put all of our videos on YouTube so people can find them, and that's probably true, but you also kind of loosen the audience in a way where you want to be using YouTube as the massive search engine that it is, but probably only for 10 or 20 videos that you want to be found with very kind of top of funnel. But a lot of the other things that you want to be doing, if you're like my chart before that started at the left for kind of like top funnel stuff, expert interviews, stuff that is just about kind of like branding of the company. YouTube does that really well, Facebook does that well, LinkedIn does that well increasingly. But for the most part, if you want to have an engaged audience, you want to have people on your website. So that's not really about SEO, but it's about figuring out like what are the things I'm doing with video and how do I like orchestrate and embed stuff. On the basics of video SEO, mainly it's about making sure that videos are transcribed well, that you have good titles, good descriptions, and mainly that you have good thumbnails. It's again like very banal. We can go very much into how do you set up your video sitemaps and do you enable inline playback in recommendations and so on. And there are small quirks of that, but the basics is basically the same thing that you would do on a page where like are people actually clicking play on my video? In a lot of cases, that's driven by the title and the description, potentially captions, and then by a thumbnail. And then there's some technicalities behind that, making sure that the embed code that you're using is basically kind of signaling all of that data to search engines using Open Graph, video sitemaps, and so on. So that becomes kind of the geeky side of that. But from an editor perspective, a lot of that is making sure, hey, you should have the right tooling. I'm a salesperson in that way. We have really good tooling. But more than that, you should be really good about setting up videos that are approachable. Thumbnails, titles, potentially descriptions, and you would be surprised by how many videos that are embedded, and there's still whatever hero video for web page final 3.4.mp4, and that is the title, and that's not really good SEO, right? So you have this opportunity to be optimizing for it. We're actually releasing a tool for optimizing a lot of this stuff, both for SEO and for human interaction in the next month or so. That will drive a lot of these recommendations in terms of, are you good at, like, is this a good thumbnail? Is this a good title? Is this a good description? And that's a good case of kind of marrying some of the conversations we've already had, like video and the human side of that with the machines and with machine learning to make sure we're also doing everything that we should be doing in a good fashion. That was the short answer.
Quick question for you. You mentioned transcription. Transcription, if you look at the quality that comes out of a YouTube transcription, or even a very good transcription, is still very poor. It's not readable, it's horrible. Is there any intention to build an AI summarization tool in the same way that Jeremy was speaking about into the 23 platform?
First, actually, transcriptions are really, really good. It's kind of, it's something where YouTube is still not in that spot. I don't know how they didn't plug it up. But a lot of this optimized thing that I just spoke about is actually going to be driven by a transcription method. And transcriptions for English language videos with decent audio quality, whether that's about webinars or video, I'll rate that kind of like you're at 97% of accuracy. There are going to be terms that where particular product names. If you're a pharma company, probably your product will not be recognized perfectly. They won't get the small R for registered trademark afterwards, all those kind of things. English language videos, they're pretty good. The reason why we haven't been kind of leaning into this more is that, well, for other European languages, language models have been pretty poor. But we're pretty confident, like we partnered with a Dutch company that is starting to do this actually across all the European languages and launching automatic transcriptions of videos, both for SEO, but also because of the summarization. So this is something that actually will be happening automatically, where you can then kind of figure out, do I want to be like fielding this as captions automatically, or do you just want to be searching?
What I'm asking is maybe beyond that.
Yeah.
Is transcriptions, if you've ever read one, are painful.
Yes.
It's got the ums and the ahs and the pauses in the conversation. An AI can take that and it can summarize it, and it can actually turn it into an article. It can turn it into something that is useful.
Yeah. So again, this is where my this is where I wear two different hats, because transcriptions are amazingly useful for accessibility, both in terms of living up to European accessibility guidelines. So that's one use case of transcriptions where they're massively important, and actually something that people have been leaning into for the last 2 or 3 years with new EU legislation. So that's another kind of geeky side of things, but also for translation. So even the case where if you're in a company where you are supporting multiple different languages, you might have English language as the main language in the company, but you still have employees that are kind of distributed across the globe. Translations of transcriptions become important. So that's just bracketing the fact that, hey, transcriptions are quite important. But then you're also exactly right, that the three use cases that we're seeing is like accessibility, translations, captions. There's something about search where transcriptions are just like amazing. That's about SEO, having the transcription of the video be part of the SEO metadata, having global search across all your content archives, and being able to jump into a video at the point where I said HubSpot. I mean, those things can be driven by transcriptions as well. And then you're kind of right about the optimization part of it, knowing exactly not only what was said, but what was really said. And that's something that, just on like the pure product side, you can expect that in the next few months.
Any other questions?
Yeah, picking up on your point about the increased number of webinars. We've only got so many hours in the day, and yet companies are knocking out more and more webinars. Do you anticipate sort of a saturation point? We're already noticing sort of webinar fatigue in terms of the market.
Yeah. So the question is about webinar fatigue. Basically, are people doing too many webinars? And I think like it's not necessarily about webinars, but it's about digital engagement. There's certainly a race for the best quality version. I won't say that there's a saturation point. I don't know. There probably is, right? There's going to be a saturation point in terms of what are the big webinars you can do. Some of our customers are banks and pension funds. They do pretty generic webinars, and they'll have whatever 10,000 people come and hear about the effects of the war in Eastern Europe on pension schemes, stuff like that, right? And there's certainly a set amount of time that you can be kind of running those and expecting huge turnouts. I think the interesting thing for me that's down to events and down to webinars, and it's more about this like the flattening out of like what are the big things you do and what are the small things you do, and what is the value of things. One of our customers is a software company that builds software for banks, and very specifically, they build software that's only applicable to 93 banks in the world. So their whole kind of, they can sell, if they sell 93 times, they've kind of saturated their market, and they say they have 14 customers right now. That's a whole different way of driving the idea of like how much engagement do I want, how many people do I want to sign up, but it also becomes a different thing in terms of engagement, right? You're kind of fighting for hours of people's lives and saturation. So on the numbers of how many people can I turn out to a bank webinar, absolutely. There's going to be a saturation point where every bank is going to be doing it, and you're going to be like that. You're going to know that it's a strategy. But the cool thing about, I'll say videos, but probably even webinars specifically, is that it's also usually a cheaper way of getting a lot of those kind of very high signal stuff across to a customer base, and that customer base might only be 20 people. So that's maybe not an answer to the question. Certainly, we all have Zoom fatigue. I can only sit this number of hours in front of a computer, all that kind of stuff. But I think it challenges us a bit to figure out, like, again, what is success here? Is it about having a few thousand people turn out to a webinar? Probably it isn't. Is this about catering to the needs of my customers in a meaningful fashion, in a way that has more signal to, where the signal to noise ratio is higher? And I think we're still a long, long way kind of away from that point. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, just a couple of things before we break. Oops, I'm sure that was not important. I'll tell you a little story about how we actually use 23 and how we use video in White Hat's marketing campaigns and how we drive traffic with it, because it is quite interesting. And Steffen spoke about quality and the getting across a very strong message. And this leads on to the later talk about AI and why we don't use AI to generate content at the moment, with one exception. So if you hear, for example, Steffen's talk or Jeremy's talk this morning, there's a lot of value in those presentations. There's a lot of things. There's a slide deck, yes, but you definitely want to hear that again, right? So we're going to be putting that up onto our platform. You'll have an opportunity to review it. But prior to the AI sort of flood of tools that came through, we would then take that and we would give it to the content team, and we would get them to create a blog post from that presentation. And I know Mel's standing at the back because she's actually done this back in the days. It takes a long time to listen, to write, to get that intonation right, to turn it into a well-documented and structured piece of content that's valuable. But it's worth it. It comes out really, really well. You end up, a presentation like that, 3,000 to 4,000 words of video, which is fantastic for the SEO of your site, but it's also not just that, it's valuable content. It's what we call remarkable content. It's better than something that is just a random blog post that you think you should be putting out there. It's an expert talking on a particular topic, which is key. And so we use video like that to capture expert thoughts, to turn it into text, to turn it into long-form content. We could take that, we could turn it into a downloadable guide, we could produce summaries for it, but we can now do that with AI. So what took the best part of a week or more sometimes to create a really good, well-structured article, we can do in about 20 minutes. We can then use the tools to create images around that. We can then summarize it. We can turn it into a LinkedIn article in another 5 minutes. We can ask the AI to read the article and produce 20 different tweets, and those can be scheduled to go out through HubSpot over a time period to promote that article so that it gets indexed and picked up by Google. We can create different messaging to go out on Facebook. We can take different messaging to go out on LinkedIn. So we can explode that one piece of content into a pack that can be spread out over a month. And we can do it at scale. So just think about that. We're going to take a break. We're going to have half an hour. Now, before we do that, I want, just so everybody knows in the room, we obviously, the White Hat team are here, so I want everybody from White Hat to sort of put their hand in the air and stand up. Steffen, can you and your team stand up so that we know who 23 are? Jeremy, if you're still here. If you want to take a break and talk to these people, and Eamon, give us a wave. If you want to talk to a HubSpotter, Eamon is here. So half an hour, coffee, I think there's more, biscuits, croissants, and we'll be back soon. Thank you so much.